Hi, everybody. It's the show with Ron where we try to add some context and commentary so we can understand what's really going on in the news. Every week now, things are ramping up to the elections in the U.S. in November. I'm sorry, people in other countries, this is the most important story in the world. I'm sorry. It just is. We pay for everything in the world and we defend the world. We're the police state that owns the world. I'm not saying I'm for any of this, but it's just the way it is. So let's get right to it. And here's Trump without his whatever that orange tanning makeup is on that he has used. Apparently, who knows? Maybe they ran out of it. We're looking at the Drudge report here. Now, you note in the past years, the Drudge report has always been considered a right-leaning news organ that has pushed republicanism and helped denigrate Democrats in the age of the internet, starting in the late 1990s. You know, the Drudge report was derided for forcing the mainstream media to carry and talk about the Monica Lewinsky scandal, which the television media and the print media at the time had just decided they had stories on it. They just weren't going to run it. It was just not going to be a story that they were going to deal with. Drudge forced that issue with this little crazy web page that's never changed since then, full of these crazy links to other stories. And also in 2016, he was criticized for kind of giving Trump a free pass. However, in 2020 and in this election year, you see a lot of very negative a lot of negative Republican pieces that are being linked on the main page. Still, it's a very interesting site, and a lot of news organizations around the world look to this for interesting, clickbaity, attention-grabbing stories. So it's important to add some context to see what's going on here. Trump no longer filled with false claims, but the point here that they're making in the Drudge is he no longer commands the spotlight, and this is a very interesting point where Trump as an undisciplined person, perhaps Trump as a non-politician politician. I was interested to see whether he could capitalize on the big boost that the assassination attempt and the Republican National Convention would have given him. But all that wind seems to have been taken out of his sails by the appointment. Now, people already voted for Biden in the primary elections, but somehow that was all thrown out, and Vice President Harris was appointed as the nominee. All nice and legal, but it seems like someone should pay back the taxpayer for conducting all those elections that they were able to discard. But anyway, the excitement that she has brought to the campaign and the sort of the sensibleness in her speech and her vice presidential pick, which we'll get to in a moment, has taken the air out of the sails of the Republicans, it seems. Now, you know, I've always got to look twice or three times at this because the media, by and large, supports the efforts of the Democratic Party really quite openly and without ever pegging it as opinion, commentary, analysis, anything like that. They just support that. They're very slanted. And then you have the Fox News Network, which is kind of insane. It's so crazy in going the other way for the Republicans or for more conservative causes, it can almost be disregarded. So you've got like 90% of the news media for the Democrats. So we got to look carefully at what's going on here. We've got poll Harris +5. We've got biggest lead in New York. That doesn't really matter. In New York because that's, or did they say Nevada? Is this, are my eyes that bad? Yes, it's Nevada. So this does matter because Nevada is one of the toss-up states. And then we have this poll. However, and I've explained this in the past, what only matters, most of the states are going for one candidate or another already. So she may be increasing her lead overall, but that doesn't matter because the U.S. has an electoral system. So whatever candidate gets one more vote than the other in that state, that candidate wins all the electoral votes for that state. So that means there's only a certain number of states that are up for grabs. Here we have states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona. However, these polls that show her winning overall are not breaking out these battleground states, which should, again, it makes it seem like perhaps she's more triumphant than in the polls than the reality is. I wanted to get to. Yeah, I mean, so here's another article that was not posted on the Drudge report that kind of shows the opposite. And another survey that shows he's ahead of her by 2 points, and Trump leading on the economy by 2-1, which is understandable. Just in the past 4 years, we've seen inflation soar for a number of reasons. People are naturally going to blame that on the existing administration. And I've said for a long time, the Democrats have not done themselves any favors by getting the media out there to tell people that things are better than ever and the economy's great. And I believe, earlier in January, we talked about that big flurry of news reports, not opinion or commentary, but news reports that were in like the New York Times and a lot of other newspapers all together on the same day talking about a new term that they're reporting on called the vibe economy. And this is, if you think that things are bad or you're paying more, it's just kind of a social media thing. It's a vibe economy. Things are better than ever. The Democrats should have said, we know inflation is hurting a lot of people. We're making it our number one priority to deal with it. So this could be a weakness for the incumbent Democrats in maintaining power, the economy. Here we have MAGA running out of steam. This is the idea, again, that Trump has been unable to capitalize on the big boost he got from the convention and the assassination attempt, and how Kamala is her appointment as the candidate has really overturned the state of affairs that in the election. But there's always a lot of seesawing in these U.S. elections, so things can change week to week and month to month. We got J.D. Vance, a lot of the press trumpeting how unsuitable a candidate he is, or he's not as far right enough for the MAGA Republicans. All the pictures, important news items that he had some eyeliner on. Of course, people who are on television, you got to put on makeup, and sometimes you get somebody who puts it on a little thick. Then you can kind of look like a fool if you don't want to. And here we have so the vice presidential nominee chosen by Vice President Harris is Tim Walz, and he's clearly picked out to be a sort of most people in the U.S., quite a lot of them are voting people are white guys who might look kind of like this, so they pick someone like this. See, he's doing something that most Americans do, not just Republicans. Owns guns, shoots off guns, and this is an opinion piece from Bloomberg. It's quite sarcastic to the right, but it does point out the interesting point that how this is the traditional white guy, manly man, shooting guns. You know, he repeats here, he's not afraid of women, afraid of black people, or terrified of the future. This is very much the way the left kind of falsely tries to portray the other side. It's sort of like preaching to the choir. It's saying that people who are against abortion hate women. And yeah, and people on the left cheer, but certainly the reality is deeper than that in why people make their decisions. But they make a lot of points here about how this guy undercuts Republican scenarios where they're trying to explain how crazy and how weak the left are. And this just seems like a reasonable guy who is vice president, and he likes his guns. So I wanted to bring this up. Here we have Kamala touts liberty in speech. Now, anybody who's watched this channel, and that's very few people, please watch this channel. I've done a lot of consulting in the past. I look more like a businessman now. I look like a crazy hippie. But my point is, when I would advise people, you know, like, how do you get beyond this polarization of far right and far left? And, you know, they have checklists of all these policies you're supposed to believe this, and all these policies you're supposed to say that. And each guy in Congress or gal in Congress gets a grade on how doctrinaire they are to the right and the left. And a way to look at it, and I think I invented this long ago, was the concept of liberty. So, and this is something that Harris is picking up. I doubt it's from me, but in my twisted ego, I'd love to think it was. Somebody heard what I said and has picked up on that. This is the idea that Americans ultimately like liberty, and pushing towards the idea of liberty, of not having the government tell you what to do, is a good way for politicians. And through that, you can transcend the far right, far left divide on things. So, for instance, and the main way to look at this could be to say Americans want the liberty, they want the choice to decide to themselves and their family if they want to have an abortion or not. They want the liberty to have that. In the same way, they want the liberty to keep and bear arms and shoot off guns sometimes. Both of those things might seem to be polar opposite in the present polarization, but if you just look at it in terms of freedom, you could say, I want the government out of my house in terms of trying to take my guns away, in the same way I want him out of my house and trying to take my abortion away. So here we have the vice president hitting upon this issue. Now, why is this, got an itch, why is this important? And the reason is, we've talked about this in the past too. If you are one of the few people who watch my channel, what you need to do in the American politics is capture the middle. And even now, when they say everything is more polarized than ever before, people say you have to be more truly true, a right wing, or you'll be a rhino, a Republican in name only. Or you got to be not just a liberal, you got to be a leftist and get real progressive and into quota systems for people, or you're not a real Democrat. But and that on the surface, it may look like that's what politics has become, but ultimately to win these swing states. And you have to look at American voters. Most of them are just regular working day people living in the center of the country, going to work. They're reasonable people. They're not following politics like we do. They just look at the broad strokes. And you want to capture the reasonable center of the people. And by using the idea of liberty, you can do that. You can make a reasonable argument for abortion rights and gun rights under the same kind of impulse. So this shows some strategy on the vice president's part in her election campaign. Let's see what else we got here. Middle school bans all black clothing, claims associated with depression and mental health issues. See, I'm getting old enough, I think kids should be dressed in uniforms anyway. You know, you have this idea that if you allow individual liberty, we're just talking about, you know, you get the classism, you get the rich kids wearing their designer stuff, and the poor kids, you know, coming into work and coming into school with crummy clothes. But interesting, and this, when you look at U.S. school systems over the decades, this is what you see all the time. You see the toing and froing where they move more towards uniforms or dress codes, and then they move away from them. Somebody is trying to message me. So this is another interesting thing. And right now we know in the U.S. We're at a situation where things are very polarized. 1968, it was a previous time like this. You have ultimate political polarization. You have an uptick in assassinations and assassination attempts. You have student protests. You have people protesting U.S. wars abroad. You have unrest. You know, during that year, the Democrats had a very chaotic, protest-laden convention. We'll see if that turns out when the Democrats have their convention. I'm not saying that things happen exactly the same way, but these are characteristics of certain times. And history doesn't just go out like this. It more goes like this. And we have a toing and froing, just as this example of school dress codes. Certain times, all the kids will grow up and they wouldn't have that. And then other times, the social situation changes and they would insist on it, or people in general would think it's a good idea. Alabama County is nation's most obese. Yeah, I had a video, one of my videos recently, were my impressions of the U.S. after being away for about 5 years, and I thought there weren't quite as many big giant people, big obese people, as they were maybe in the last 20 or so years that I had seen. However, I did notice a lot of misshapen people who look like they had like partially melted, big, huge, sagging butts of both men and women, and I remember when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, it was not like that. Go back to your home movies and look at people, how skinny they were. Does DEI training discriminate? Blah, 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 against white people. Courts will decide. This is a certain kind of thing we've had here in the United States. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. You have certain quotas essentially for different genders and different ethnic groups of people. This all comes about not just because people say I want this fairness. This comes about because big money interests somehow got the idea that this would be a good idea. And of course, a big problem in any business, cash flow. For cash flow, you need things like bridging loans. And so when you, as a business, apply for bridging loans and any kind of credit, they started to add on this idea of DEI. They want to see the list of numbers, verifiable numbers of how many people of these different sexual identities, different ethnic identities, and they better line up to certain goals that are set for the company to bring more people of those ethnicities and those gender identities into the company. Now, as many of my friends on the right want to denigrate this as just a terrible un-American thing, it did come about because there seemed to be a structural barrier in American business and in society that over the decades stubbornly kept different levels of ethnicities and gender identities at specific levels, and very largely white guys held all the power, and so there was an impulse to say, oh, there must still be barriers. There still must be a glass ceiling that are keeping these different ethnicities and different groups out of certain jobs. What the real reason for all that was, I don't know, but it led businesses to these big lenders to get involved in this DEI initiative, which is sort of like affirmative action. We had that in the 60s and 70s, where you have quotas of black people to try to force black people into different societies and jobs and schools and things. So probably this DEI stuff has probably run its course now. It's now getting into the U.S. courts. Courts are likely to rule against a lot of this, to say that purely this kind of quota-based inclusionary stuff is going the way of the dodo again. They already kind of went through this with affirmative action in the late 70s. We probably have a good example of it with the Secret Service head, that lady who was the head of the Secret Service after Trump got shot. They had all the quotes and all the times in the past after she was appointed, she was just talking about we have a goal of 30% women in the Secret Service, this sort of thing. So people question, well, what other criteria do you have? Are they tall enough? Are they strong enough? Are they the very best and brightest? Should it only be like old, big, gigantic men who are Navy SEALs or Marines in directly protecting the president? Should a very short woman be able to do that? Do we really want to see, a short woman, a little woman take a bullet for Donald Trump? I don't know. So, but the point is that overall, a lot of these DEI placement situations, and here we have training specifically where white people were offended to hear about the references to white supremacy, white exceptionalism, etc. So this is probably going away. What do we got? We got a terrible plane crash in Brazil. They got the video here on Twitter. Thank goodness for Twitter. Twitter puts anything on there now, again, after Elon Musk has taken it over. I mean, he's too crazy with his conspiracy theories, but I like the freer, open internet of the past. But whatever you do, don't watch those videos if you're going on a plane flight. They show that plane going down. Entertainment industry buckling. Riots in Britain. There were the rumors going around that the person who did a stabbing was an Arab guy or Islamicist, as I think they both say that in the UK, and so people were protesting that. But that you can just condemn those people who rioted, but you also can say what's behind that. And obviously there's certain racial tensions there that need to be addressed, and specifically, not sure what, some article I read did have some good points about what caused that build-up to happen in the UK was the government managing the details of the news. That it's better to put out all the information right away, as we would tend to do in the U.S. in terms of the ethnicity of who did it. We always hear if it's a white guy who did it in the U.S., they don't put it in the headlines, but you'll find out if you look at the news article, the race or the ethnicity of the person who commits certain acts. But in the UK, for various reasons, that was held back, and it created a situation in which online rumor filled in for the lack of information. So, as it turned out, it was a Rwandan guy. But this usually, again, with liberty, you probably want to err on putting out more information rather than having government people manage it and then having false information fill in the blanks that people are going to do if you hold back information. The Olympics, who cares? Expensive mansions. When I was a kid, here's a $35 million mansion on Lake Michigan, $300 mansion in Malibu. When I was a kid, I always thought I was going to get one of these. I don't think it's going to happen at this point. I gave it my best shot. Burning Man, of all things. Ticket sales dry up. That's kind of the end of an era. Burning Man, I know it was all the way back to the early 90s or late 80s, but it really became a thing during the internet era, and now it seems like it's had its time. And finally, let's leave on a positive note. The Sun is always good for these kind of articles. Impending pyramid doom. Ancient pyramid collapse in Mexico. Supernatural sign of impending doom. This is what a lot of, I think, Americans have been feeling about their politics recently. It certainly is exciting. So I doubt that any ancient civilization that was not really unable to predict its own collapse or have the high technology to prevent its own collapse can tell us anything today. So, but these sort of stories do get under our skin because we are instinctual monkeys that wear clothes, or apes that wear clothes. So let's please watch my site and let's talk about the context of these news articles so we don't get too wrapped up in impending pyramid doom as the election gets closer. So because of the subject matters I've talked about and the things I've spoken openly about here, YouTube at least, this is on Rumble as well, but YouTube at least won't let me monetize or promote this, and it may even be a kind of shadow banned because of the subject matter. So please like and subscribe, tweet about this on Twitter. I think the news is interesting and fun as opposed to doomy if we can talk about the history and the context of what's really going on. So stay tuned. There's going to be lots of crazy news coming up, I'm sure, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.